Hello, guys. Welcome back to First Time Fantasy. This week, a little bit different. We're going to just do audio only, so we'll still have this up on YouTube, so you'll be able to listen there. You don't got to look at our ugly mugs. And this will also be up at least on Spotify, working on Apple Podcasts and Google as well, but this will definitely be up on Spotify as well. If you came to the YouTube channel, you can look in the link in the description to Spotify to listen to some of our other episodes as well. But without further ado, this is going to be some of our quick hits this week and waiver ads. And of course, I'm Rick. I'm joined here with my co-host Arj. What's up?
Hey, how's it going?
All right, so I'll start off here. First, one of my quick hits this week is we got to see Josh Allen and Justin Herbert kind of bounce back and finally put up some fancy numbers that I think everyone expected going into the season, especially with Allen. I believe he finished both his first 2 weeks, both under sub 20 points, which for a guy like him coming off such a great year last year was a little bit surprising. They did have to play against some pretty good defenses the first 2 weeks, so it wasn't a complete shock. And I think anyone like myself, and I believe you also have Allen in one of your leagues, I don't think anyone was hitting the panic button by any means. So we finally got to see a pretty big week from him. And on top of that, you had Herbert kind of doing the same. I think it was, even though he's a younger guy, people still have pretty high expectations. And on top of that, they have a pretty good receiving core as well, which Mike Williams and Keenan Allen had been pretty much killing fantasy so far this year. And obviously, Herbert's been the one throwing to him. Herbert just had a few issues through the first few weeks where he was throwing a few picks here and there and wasn't exactly throwing for a ton of touchdowns. But funny enough, both guys this week have thrown for 4 touchdowns and ended up scoring 30-plus fantasy points each. So if you're like one of us and you had Josh Allen, I was fortunate enough in a 12-man league to score nearly 170 points this week. I think RG were able to do the same in one of our other leagues. So
Yep.
definitely a big boost, and nice to see both those guys kind of come around and perform to some of the fantasy expectations that we had going into the season.
Yeah, and piggybacking off the quarterback thing and going with somebody who we did not have high expectations for is Kirk Cousins. I've been against Kirk Cousins for a long time. That deal he signed in Minnesota at first was just horrible. I never thought he was that good of a quarterback. I still really don't think he's that good, but he's surrounded by one of the best casts in football. His receiving core is arguably one of the best. He has an incredible running back and then a very, very good backup, as we saw this past week. Both good pass-catching backs. It's a perfect storm for somebody like Cousins, who does have some pretty good accuracy. He's not going to wow you with really anything, but with all of those pieces around him, he's finally putting it together this year. It really looks like a different Kirk Cousins than we're used to seeing, and it's showing by people adding him more off of the waiver wire, and it's also just shown with his score. I think he's had over 20 points each week so far. It's been a surprise. I like Minnesota, so that makes me happy. I'm not a fan of Kirk Cousins, so that makes me not happy, but I'd rather him do well. It's better for the sport and better for fantasy football.
Yeah, I would kind of agree with that, where I don't know why, but something about him I don't like either. And I don't know what
the biggest sponsor is like Sleep Number with him. That should tell you enough right there.
Boy. Well, then again, I think Dak also, that's a pretty big sponsor. I recall many Sleep Number commercials with Dak in them during the Sunday night game. So
yeah, but he also has Campbell's. So
yeah, I mean, I like Dak though, but yeah, I don't know what it is about Cousins. Something is off, but I mean, yeah, you can't really ignore the nice little streak he's got going through these first few games. All right, so I'm going to switch it up a little bit away from quarterback for a second here. Another highlight this week is we got to see Jamar Chase really kind of turning it up another notch. You know, he looked, all the headlines going into the season, dropping the ball, yada, yada. I mean, that's just a distant memory at this point. You know, he ends up catching 2 touchdowns against a pretty good Steelers defense. Although they were a bit beat up, but still nonetheless 2 touchdowns, including a nice one right before the half on a deep pass from Burrow. That gives a total of 4 touchdowns for Chase so far this season, and I don't know if fantasy managers could have expected anything better than this so far. I mean, It's not, I wouldn't say it's a surprise, but, rookie wide receiver, Bengals kind of coming in, Burrow's getting healthy again. Their offensive line isn't supposed to be all that good, but, the Bengals come out and, I personally wasn't too surprised by this, even being a Steelers fan. Maybe I'm a little more pessimistic when I'm looking at them and just not as confident in that offense overall. But speaking of that offense, would you like to explain to us what happened, Arch?
Oh, God. So
I don't know how much time we have, but
Steelers went into this game without Deontay Johnson, so without their number one receiver. So any fantasy manager could have expected Juju and even Chase Claypool to have a big outing. And the one thing that people failed to think about is that all hinges on Ben Roethlisberger. And he has looked, saying horrible would be too nice for him. And I've seen a lot of people saying, oh, you can't give up on Ben this early. It's like, he does not look like a professional football player at this point. And when somebody is his age and is coming off of a season where the team itself did well, he did adequate, end of the season, did not do well. It's like, you can't ignore what you're watching right now. And Juju went out early. Chase Claypool put together decent amount of points. I think he got close to 20 points, but that's because of just 9 easy little that's yardage grabs.
You got volume at that point because the Steelers are losing and they have no choice but to throw. So yeah.
And it's like, I want them to do this. I want them to throw Chase Claypool the ball more because I think that he is the best receiver on the team, and that's how it should be. The offense should run through Najee and Chase. And you started seeing that. It was more out of a necessity than actually the team realizing, hey, here are 2 best offensive players. But Harris got damn near 20 targets, I think. 19?
Yeah, 19 targets. You would have thought this was Darren Waller week 1 or something. It was insane.
And I don't think we need to target Harris 20 times, but I wouldn't hate to see between 5 and 10 as a standard for him. And then I think the same for Chase Claypool. It needs to be between 5 and 10. Stop using Chase as the deep threat only. Start using him inside. Start using him on the edge for some short routes. But this offense has looked horrible, and I worry about it from fantasy and from just being a Steelers fan. I have Chase Claypool in one league, and I liked that he got the volume, but I am not nearly comfortable enough to play him because of the state of that offense. Now, switching to one more positive thing real quick before I pass it back to you, I got to pat myself on the back for Jamar Chase because I took him about 1 full round before his ADP because I didn't want him to slide to somebody else. I don't watch much college football anymore. When I lived in Wisconsin, I watched a decent amount, and that's when Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow played together at LSU. And I just remember watching that and just thinking that those two had some sort of next level chemistry. So sort of like the chemistry we saw between Big Ben and Antonio Brown at one point. Hopefully this one ends better than that one. But if Chase can put up half the numbers of Antonio Brown in his prime, then that's a great career. And I'm happy for the guy, and I'm happy for Cincinnati that they have a glimpse of hope.
Yeah, not to go off on the Steelers too much, but it was nice to see Najee get the volume. But pretty much like you said, nail on the head. I wish it was under different circumstances though. They obviously were forced into obviously throwing the ball, and unfortunately, I think that's going to be a pretty normal game script for them. These next few weeks aren't going to be very easy, and while they might get a little bit healthier on the defensive side, which will be a boost. I think same thing I said last week when we had our fantasy forecast is just not confident enough in the quarterback to trust the rest of the players. Now, if Najee, if he sees between 5 and 10 targets every game, even though rushing wise that line isn't really good enough, I think he only had like 40 yards or something like that. That's pretty unfortunate, but so far, and this is barring something crazy, not crazy, but one of the running backs going off on Monday Night Football here, Najee will finish as the RB1 for this week, which is great. But, you'd rather it not be because he had 14 catches. And they had some injuries, so there's some reason for it with no Deontay and Juju going down. But as a Steelers fan, wish the game script was a little bit different. And, aging quarterback. And beyond that, we'll move on here. So, waiver ads this week. My top ad is going to be Chuba Hubbard. If you weren't aware, CMC will probably miss some games with a hamstring injury. So, Hubbard is definitely a top ad this week, and in particular, most likely the top ad at running back. You can't really get around that. So far, Carolina's looked pretty good on offense. Darnold is able to do enough, albeit last week, they played Houston, and while they don't have a very good defense, still a good showing from Darnold, and Hubbard didn't look too bad either. He was also involved a decent amount in the passing game with 5 targets, and he caught 3 of those for 27 yards. Not too bad. He also had 11 rushes for 52 yards. So obviously they'll probably be working him in a bit more. You do have Royce Freeman behind him, but he didn't get too much work during that game. I wouldn't really worry about that.
In the words of Scott Brinker, who the fuck's Royce Freeman?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I don't think that unless they come out and say that they're gonna basically split carries or something, Hubbard seems to be the go-to guy in the next one up. And it sounds like the news with CMC is that they're not gonna put him on IR, but it looks like he could at least miss 2 weeks, maybe a third week, but not being on IR, he might be good after just missing the next 2 games. So definitely look for Hubbard, who's also only owned in 11% of leagues.
All right, my first waiver wire ad, I'll stick with the running backs here. Peyton Barber. I'm on record as early as about 5 days ago saying he sucks.
I think I agreed with that. Don't worry. I still agree with that.
but the usage that they're showing can't be ignored, and he did have a good game this week. Rushed for over 100 yards. They're sticking with him. I mean, Josh Jacobs was still injured. There's a good chance he comes back this week. They seem to not want to use Kenyon Drake at all in the rush attack. When Josh Jacobs comes back, there's a solid chance that he just takes all of these touches away from Peyton Barber. But for now, I like adding him. I'm probably going to give it a try to add him just as some insurance there. If for some reason this Josh Jacobs injury is worse than it seems, or if it's going to nag him throughout the season, Peyton Barber has the potential to be a top 30 running back play for the rest of the season. So nothing incredible, but in a 12-team league, it's a pretty solid grab with some potential for more. I'm not going to put all of my eggs in that basket, but I think he has potential to have a pretty solid season if Josh Jacobs has a lingering injury.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to stick with the same team here, but switch it up to quarterback. This is something that, even though we didn't post this last week, I definitely talked about it. Derek Carr should be rostered in every single league. He is proved to be a quarterback 1. He's currently owned, and this falls just in the sweet spot, owned in 50% of ESPN leagues. So he just makes the cut here. And he had I believe I double checked it before this, he had like a 36% increase from week 2 to week 3 here. So people obviously were already catching on that, he's at the very least a good stream. And of course they were also playing Miami, although Miami having a decent secondary. For anyone who watched that game or at least saw the highlights, that ended up being a nail biter, and Miami kind of proved that they could put up a fight. But Carr had another week of 20 plus fantasy points, and shockingly enough, he's put up another performance with at least 380 yards, which is pretty crazy. And he also currently leads the league in passing yards, which could be another reason to add someone like Barber or Kenyon Drake if they're going to be splitting out wide and actually throwing to some of those backs. But yeah, no reason why. I mean, if you had some quarterback trouble, Carr is, you could have grabbed him last week, and just like that, you might have a QB1 for the rest of the season. But at the very least, he should absolutely be rostered in every league. Even if, personally, I actually have him in a league where I have Dak as my QB1. And yeah, I'm probably never going to start Carr over Dak. But still, it took a week or two. No one grabbed him, and I didn't have a problem with scooping him up.
Yeah, injuries happen, so.
Yep.
I'll stick with quarterback there because just like the person I talked about in our quick hits, Kirk Cousins, can't be ignored how well he's been playing. No matter if it's his supporting cast or him, doesn't matter. He's putting up the numbers, he's putting up the points, and same thing with Carr, where even if you have a solid quarterback, it can't hurt you. You're not going to kill yourself by opening up a bench spot for a Carr or a Cousins as in case of injury, or there's always bye weeks. Or if both of those guys continue the streak, you could use them as trade bait. I mean, it's just a great person to add with how he's been playing and with his supporting cast with Justin Jefferson. You have Adam Thielen. You have Dalvin Cook when he's healthy. And then who's
KJ Osborne?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the newer receiver. Yep.
Yeah, so he has all the weapons he needs to put up a QB1 season, and I will be probably trying to add him. Oh no, in our main league, Matt added him because he drafted Ryan Fitzpatrick as his QB1.
Yeah, and he had Tua, so
yeah.
RIP. He's had a tough run at QB so far.
So yeah, add Cousins and Carr.
Yeah, I'll be switching it up again here. We're gonna hop to wide receiver. This one I was a little surprised by. I'm not gonna lie, but Christian Kirk only owned in 22% of ESPN leagues, and I know last week was like I said we didn't post last one because it got a little squirrely, but we mentioned Rondale Moore, as did many people. He made tons of people's waiver ads for having a pretty good week. But Christian Kirk ended up being the winner this week in the Arizona offense. It's kind of a mixed bag, only because you don't know which guy is going to go off. They, of course, have Hopkins, so starting Kirk is a little bit sketchy because, Hopkins is going to, play the majority of the snaps. He's going to get a lot of the looks, but the bad news with Hopkins is he's normally getting good, better defenders and better cornerbacks than someone like Kirk will get. So it's kind of like a sneaky stash where people were more higher on like Rondale Moore last week, and I believe, even though we never posted that episode, I definitely mentioned at one point that I'd be more comfortable with Kirk than Moore, because I mean they're both kind of not unproven, but Moore especially isn't. But at least Kirk has a bit of a resume to go off of, and they play in a pretty high-powered offense that is pretty focused on passing the ball. So if there was someone I'd prefer to have rest of season, it's absolutely Kirk. Unfortunately, this week might not be the best to, like I said, I think he's a good stash, but they do play the Rams this week, so it's a pretty tough matchup, although I could see that also being a pretty high-scoring match. So he might be someone to still look out for as a potential flex play depending on your roster, and some of the injuries throughout the week, as we saw a few receivers go down as well.
Yeah, well, I'll throw in my last one is Emmanuel Sanders. I mean, he's somebody that you and I both looked at as a potential target in the draft. He went undrafted in our main league, but you've since picked him up, I believe.
Yep. Yes, sir.
And he, he put up big numbers this Sunday. I mean, he's playing with a fantastic quarterback. He's a good wide receiver, and he's still been one the past few years, just on some teams where, I mean, he was on the Saints where Michael Thomas gets a bunch of throws, and then the season just kind of gets derailed. And then before that, he was on the Broncos.
Yeah, I
and
so.
May have been another team in between. I don't even know. He's just getting tossed all around, but he's still a very solid player. And in that Bills offense with that very, very solid passing attack, he's going to put up big numbers. I don't think he'll put up wide receiver one numbers like every week like he did this week, but I see him as a weekly flex play moving forward. And I think he's surpassed Cole Beasley on that team. And that's probably just because I hate Cole Beasley, but I do like Emmanuel Sanders as a solid flex play moving forward. And before I pass it over to you for some defensive streams, Rick, got to throw out there about my boy Mike Williams. Not as a waiver wire ad because he's in about 90% of leagues, but I did see that he was only started in about 50% of leagues this past week.
Very surprising.
What more do you guys got to see? He put up 20 some points, then another 20 points, and then 33 this week. Start the guy. He deserves recognition. He might have a bad week because every wide receiver does, but he's a must start moving forward.
Yeah, I think as of last week, that was, I mean, after week one, I grabbed him. There's another 12-man league I'm in as well that I was able to grab him. And, I mean, I started him, obviously, this week. I started him last week. He's just putting up 20-point games. I mean, that Chargers offense is pretty good. And like I mentioned with the quick hits, Herbert's fantasy numbers hadn't looked great. But overall, he was still playing well, but the fantasy numbers weren't really there. But Allen and Williams had both been popping off with like 20+ point games fantasy wise. And I know Williams was seeing like a crazy amount, like 10+ targets a game or something like that. Like it's just absolutely insane. So
yeah.
All right, so I do have a few defenses I like to stream. I don't know if I forgot to mention to you, I do have a few tight ends that might just be some streaming options as well that I can mention after this. But if you like to stream a defense like I do, and whether you have a solid defense or not, you're looking pretty much for a good matchup. And you got the Titans playing the Jets this week. Titans are only owned in 8% of leagues. You have the Bears playing the Lions, although the Lions have kind of proved that they can score, so that might be a little bit sketchier, but the Bears defense still available in 14% of leagues, and I believe the Bears did lose Khalil Mack. I don't recall the extent of that injury, but I know that he did leave that game early. And then I think one of the better plays this week, although it's not the best. The Titans is probably your first ad playing the Jets, but I think the Bengals defense only owned in 5%. Bengals obviously beat the Steelers, like we mentioned at the top of the episode there, but they kept the Steelers in check, and on top of that, they get to play the Jaguars, who lead the league in turnovers with 9 through the first 3 games, and they just had 4 this past week against the Cardinals. So if you're looking for a defense, the Bengals could be sneaky good and, give you a nice 15 to 20 point performance, although we did see the Jags put up a bit of a fight against the Cardinals. But ultimately, they didn't really put a full game together. They put like a half together, if that. So look for Lawrence to be throwing a few more interceptions against a decent Bengals defense.
Yeah, those all seem solid picks. I'm like you. I like to stream my defenses, so I will be probably using my waiver claims on one of those defenses.
Yeah, I'm going to probably have to put a claim in on all 3 at this point because, I mean, the matchups are too juicy. Anyone's going to look at that and say, oh, who's playing the Jets? Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe I got a roster slot open for the Titans defense. So, and then I did only have, these are also some streaming options at tight end, and it's mostly because of some of the points you already mentioned with the Buffalo offense. If you're in desperate need for a tight end, maybe look for someone like Dawson Knox. With Allen kind of getting back onto the pace that we expected, he ended up having a pretty good fantasy week. He's only owned in 4% of leagues. Might be more of a spot start if you had bad luck or you have a pick that didn't work out. Like if you went with maybe like a Hunter Henry or Jonnu Smith, and they're not bad, but they're not doing great. Knox is a bit more of a not long shot per se, but you're going to see some inconsistency, but because he's in such a high-powered offense, that might be a decent ad. And then the only other one here is Austin Hooper, with Jarvis Landry out and OBJ just coming back. Hooper, I think, only had like 10 points this week, maybe a little bit under, but he's owned in less than 50% of the leagues, and with Landry out and OBJ kind of working his way back in, that just opens up some targets for him as well.
Yeah, all solid pickups. I might actually, now that you mention it, I might snag another tight end because not that I'm worried about Hawkinson, but I mean a 3-point outing is always going to be eye opening. Yeah. But
hey, if you got a slot for him, there's some deeper ads for you.
Yeah, well, I think that pretty much covers week 3 and what we can look forward to in week 4 as far as waiver ads. Just like last week, we'll be back at you on Saturday morning with some of our best picks for the week, our starts, our sits, and just what you can expect for the Sunday and Monday slate.
Yeah, sounds good. The only other thing I'm going to mention is, like you said, we'll be back with another episode Saturday. In the meantime, though, if you'd like to follow us on Twitter at @FTFantasy_. Throughout the week, we retweet and tweet our thoughts about a lot of different matchups or injuries or fantasy news that seemingly comes out this week. Not as many injuries this week, but there are some bigger guys like A.J. Brown. Both Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton left the game early. James White left the game early. Juju, same thing. There's just always news that you can keep up to date that we try to make sure we're at least retweeting on to some Twitter feeds. So check it out if you get a second.